Hello and welcome to Moving Beyond Stigma, the podcast where we talk about all things mental health. I am your host, Michelle Crossman, and today we have a couple guests here to talk about a very important community-based charitable organization that focuses on creating safety for survivors of abuse to reclaim their voices and help them heal. This organization is called the Gatehouse. Bringing into the conversation today, we have Maria, Stuart, and Jasmine. Welcome to Moving Beyond Stigma.
Thanks for having us here.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'm very excited to see where the conversation goes today. And to get us started, I would love for each of you to just take some time to introduce yourselves, tell us a little bit about who you are and what you do at the Gatehouse.
Go first. My name is Maria. I'm the director of the Gatehouse. I've been here for about 13 years, and I am a survivor of childhood sexual abuse.
Hi, I'm Jasmine. I've been at the Gatehouse for about 3 years now. I started as a placement student, and I'm now a program assistant here at the Gatehouse, and I help coordinate the Phase 1 programs, which is our program that participants who first come into the Gatehouse usually comes into, and a little everything else as well. Thank you.
Thank you. And I am Stuart, and I'm program assistant here at the Gatehouse. I've been here since 2011, and yes, I am a survivor of childhood sexual abuse myself, so it brings me a great pleasure to be here today to talk about the things that nobody wants to talk about. So thank you.
Yes, thank you all so much. As I was reading into the website and everything, again, I mentioned in my email that I've been following on social media for quite a while. And then when I reached out to you to do this podcast, I wanted to dig a little deeper, right? So I took a bigger look into the website and looked at the programs that you offer. And I have to say, I really love how much information is there, but it's also not overwhelming. Like, it's very, from my perspective anyways, it seems very accessible that way. Again, like having the brochures accessible to people, which again could easily be printed out for people as well and handed out. It seemed like a very tangible place to start, especially, for something that is extraordinarily overwhelming, to try to take that first step to join any kind of program, to get any kind of help. That can be daunting and overwhelming. So having a site like that was just quite welcoming and informative, but also not too much. It was really, really great to see. And then I got into the history side of the website as well, which I thought was very fascinating. How much history the building has and how long these programs have been up and running. Because I honestly, up until a few years ago, I really had no idea that the Gatehouse even existed. So I am sure that there's still lots of people out here that don't know, which was a big reason why I wanted to very much do this podcast and talk to all of you. Yeah. So what, aside from, I guess, personal experience, because obviously a lot of times it tends to be the big drive when we kind of zone in on very specific areas when it comes to mental health and abuse and addictions. And, we tend to usually have a personal connection to it when we go this far into it with our work. Was there any other reason that stood out for each of you to decide to start working with the Gatehouse?
Yeah, for me, I wanted to help people. It was in another field before, a whole other career. And that career promised to be a helping field, and it turned out it wasn't. So everybody's going to go look up my bio now and now I know what it is. It's public information. And I wanted to help people on a more heart level, right? On a more of that emotional connection, as opposed to that business-like connection that an HR person has to have, right? With the staff that they're engaging with, of course. Of course, what you mentioned, the lived experience, but wanting to give back in a way that was also transformational on a social level as well. Like, we're actually making huge impacts and transformative social change here at the Gatehouse in a myriad of ways that we're going to talk about. But that's all I have on that for now, because I can go on for a while. Jasmine?
Yeah, thanks, Maria. Similarly, I didn't plan on working in the social kind of work field. I had other plans, and I realized but I've always wanted to help other people. And that field, it was kind of what I wanted to do was okay, there's only so much I can do to help others. And then so I looked at programs, came across this program, and I got placement here at the Gatehouse. And then I like to joke that, I just couldn't stay away after placement. because this place kind of just gets a grasp on you, just with how safe and inclusive it's this space is a very I don't know if magical is the right term, but it's such a safe place that I really just couldn't leave. And the work that we do, it's such an honor and a privilege to be able to be there for participants and support them in any way possible. So that's kind of my journey here at the Gatehouse. Yeah.
And for myself, well, right off with it was very, very selfish. I came here with the intent of just helping myself. And back in 2011, because I was very much, well, put it this way, I was very, very much a broken man, and that's a gross understatement on my part, to say the least. But what it brought me to after doing the programs was obviously I became volunteering, and one of the things I really didn't expect was, well, I came here not having a voice. Well, after being here a while, I did develop a voice in many, many aspects. And, one of the things was like such as just being able to, communicate with people. And when I talk about volunteering, my voice, well, one thing I didn't expect was that I would get the same thing from other people with the same experience when they were coming here. So it created a great source of personal connection and also the ability to, over a period of time, as I discovered who I really was, to express myself as I learned others that have done the program and gone through. But this has been very, very powerful in the sense that I've found my voice, but at the same time now I'm giving back to other men and women. Primarily, my primary role here is obviously to help with the men, but I'm kind of all over the place here, so I'm not just helping men, but primarily that's what I've been doing. But dealing with the men that I've been dealing with over the years and talking about our stories and stuff has brought me a sense of power to my voice, which I really ever thought possible. So, day after day that I'm here and working with everybody, people around me, people coming to the house, well, it's really hard to put words to the voice that I've found, other than, I have voice in the connection. And, when I talk about personal transformation, well, I've found mine. And, and the last point I want to make here too is that, well, in this field, I noticed there's a really great lack of men that are doing that sort of thing. So I feel very empowered being able to do that, and also with my voice on top of that.
Definitely.
It's led me to all kinds of things, which obviously at this hour or time we have will not allow me to talk about that, obviously. But and that's why I'm here now. It's just plain simple in that find my voice from others, and here I am talking about it today. So I hope that clarifies that. So thank you.
Oh, definitely. Thank you so much. I got goosebumps listening to that. I find that to be the most, I would say, like, powerful healing tool, honestly, is finding your voice. And however it is you get there. And then, so to be able to genuinely say, like, yes, I've done this work and I've done that, and I've done it in a place that has supported me and helped me see who I truly am. And then to take that and then help others, a healing journey has never really ended. So having that, it kind of feels like a full circle moment there that just kind of keeps happening and happening and happening, where you're continuously helping yourself through helping others now at this point, because you have done all of this work and you're surrounded by all of these great people. And mentioning the, like, magical energy, like, I can just imagine that, like, you need to have the right kind of people in these spaces for people to want to come and actually feel seen, and make the strides that you've made to be able to continue the journey. And that's absolutely beautiful. So thank you so much, all of you, for sharing those bits and pieces. I love that. Yeah, I think starting, with something that affects us so personally, and then moving forward with it is such a brave act, especially when it's something like sexual abuse, because again, that's something that people don't want to talk about it. They want to just shove it away somewhere and then keep going. And that's not, we can't get anywhere in our healing journey when we do that. And like you said, especially with men, not talked about enough, and it's not shared enough. So, how many people just go through their life and just never talk about it? So, it's really incredible that you've been able to take that and continue your journey in this way.
Absolutely.
Yeah, thank you so much. I would love to hear, I guess, a little bit more specifics of a couple of the different programs that are available.
Yeah, I can jump in here, Michelle. Thank you. When participants first come into the Gatehouse, there's a couple of things. So you have to be a survivor of childhood sexual abuse. The incidents had to occur before you're 18 years old, and you have to be an adult survivor. So we can only accept participants that are 18 and over. And usually they would go into our phase one program. But before they can do that, they have to go through an intake assessment first. So they can find that on our website, thegatehouse.org. There's an intake form there. It can be submitted to, right now it's to Karen, and then from there kind of an assessment intake, whether it's through virtual, on Zoom, or on the phone. It's just about a half an hour, 45-minute intake assessment. So then they would go into our 15-week phase one program. So it's 15 weeks. It's very psychoeducational in the sense that each week there's a different topic. The first week is introductions and house rules. Second is isolation to belonging. Then we have anger. We have boundaries. We have inner child. Inner child is a big one. We have that one's 3 weeks. And in each group, we have each session. There's activities. There's information, that sort of thing, and how it's very relevant to the experience of a sexual abuse survivor. And we have virtual. We have in person. Right now, we're not doing any hybrid groups. And for our in-person, is accessible to anybody that's nearby, and our virtual is anybody across Canada. We have all women's groups, all men's group, and all genders group. So we do try to be as inclusive as possible, as safe as possible, while also kind of respecting kind of triggers in terms of like genders and etc. Because that can be a big trigger for we're trying to say activations now instead of triggers, just for the connotations behind it. So that can be a big activation for participants, understandably so. So yeah, it's a little bit of kind of like the big picture of our programs. Our in-person groups are typically like we have 2 facilitators, I should say, all across our groups. We have 2 co-facilitators. A lot of our co-facilitators are survivors of the program who have gone through the program. They're not necessarily all survivors. We do have volunteers kind of across all spaces that all show up for the same reasons, right? To try to help support survivors and so forth. Yeah, I think I've covered most of it.
Thank you so much. I love that. Yes, having the lived experience of going through the actual program to then become a facilitator must be also just so incredibly helpful. With so many different programs that are out there, like, to have that actual experience, you learn a lot from that side, of what works with you and what doesn't work with you. And then, the more knowledge you gain, and then you're able to share that as a facilitator as well, maybe, offer aside, a different way to look at something or a different way to word something that might help somebody else because, the original way that you were taught maybe didn't quite sit right with you, and then you can take that and learn from it and keep, and it kind of like, again, passes down and keeps growing, which is really beautiful. Yep. I would love to hear more about the inner child work. As you mentioned that it takes extra 3 weeks, you said, I believe.
Yeah, I can definitely expand on that, and Stuart as well through it, right?
Of course.
So the inner child really is, it's kind of a difficult concept to explain, but all of us have that inner little kid, and a lot of us are walking around with a wounded inner child that haven't done the work, that haven't gone to therapy or peer support spaces. We may be reacting to things as opposed to responding to them, right? So if we're reacting in intense anger, or having feelings of intense shame. It may be our little child that was abused at the age of 4 that is acting out as in an adult body, right? So we do a meditation to reconnect with that child. And sometimes it's different parts or different time periods that that inner child has been wounded over time, right? There's people here that have more than one abuser, more than one time being abused, sometimes decades of abuse, and different abusers, right? So sometimes their inner child may be a 4 year old, sometimes their inner child is at 14, sometimes their inner child is at 10, right? So they go back and they meet their inner child at the age of the time of the abuse, and they have a conversation with them in this meditation. So we do a visualization with the participants. And when they come out of that visualization, they actually jot down any conversations they may have had with their inner child. What was their inner child wearing? Did their inner child give them something? Because sometimes a gift may be exchanged in that meditation. Sometimes it's a word. Sometimes the child rejects the adult trying to come in that meditation. So it sounds, it definitely is not an easy process, right? It's very emotionally activating for participants to go through that. It's often the first time they're meeting their inner child or that childlike self that is in their subconscious or conscious, sometimes mind, that is driving the adult proverbial bus. So we don't want our inner child to drive the proverbial bus. We want the adults to learn to reparent themselves. And often the survivors that come here didn't have a stable, welcoming childhood home. They had maybe emotional abuse, physical abuse, and sometimes their parents are also the sexual offenders. So they're learning to reparent themselves in healthier ways as part of that inner child healing process. There's a great book called The Inner Child Work by Lucia Capaccioni that people can pick up. It's pink cover, and she actually donated a couple of those books here. And that's how we started working on that 25 years ago, incorporating that inner child activity. And I'm going to ask Stuart if you want to talk about the letter writing process that we do with the inner child.
Yeah, this is a very interesting process. That thank you, Maria. There's actually two different exercises that we conduct when doing this. And one of the ones we do, Maria mentioned about the meditation in the beginning. And behind that process of the meditation is that we connect with the inner child. And for some of us, I'm speaking for myself, obviously, I never made that connection as a child or as an adult. So this was very, very foreign to me in a sense. Well, really, in layman's terms, what the heck are you talking about?
Yeah.
This was my experience because when I did the meditation originally the first time, I did not make that connection. So basically, talking about myself here, obviously, I'm not talking about others, is that in my experience, when I did it the first time, I did make the connection. And adding a little bit more to that, well, basically, Maria kind of touched base on this. Well, when we talk about who's driving that bus, well, I tell you, my child drove my bus from a very, very young age, right into adulthood, to where I was actually able to make that connection. Well, I had to do the meditation 2 times. I'll explain about the writing part right after this part. So I did the meditation the second time from one of our facilitators going back many years ago, and she was able to actually help me do that. I also at that time I processed a lot more with myself, so I think I was actually able to do it the second time around because when I first came here, I was too distraught in my own thoughts, could not place them where they belong. So when I actually did the exercise, I was basically what I said in the beginning of my statement. What's going on here? I couldn't do it. So I did the second exercise and then I did the writing exercise. Now, the writing exercise that we do with this is one of the writing exercises we do with this is that, well, we're using both hands, the right hand or whatever dominant hand you are, being the adult hand, and the non dominant hand being the child hand. And in this exercise, well, this is just about connection and meeting one another. So in that connection, we talk to one another, and then, well, our conversation could be anything like that. Again, I'm speaking about myself. My conversation with myself was my child reminding me of when I was a child, when I felt safe. Just an example of when I would go up to northern Quebec and I would go fishing with my uncle. That's where I found safety because I was in the middle of the bush, middle of nowhere. In fact, was to be more precise, I was in the middle of reserve in Maniwaki, and there was no people around. The only people who were there were black bears and wildlife, deer, all that kind of thing. It was a safe place for me to go. Why I thought went back there, I have no idea. But that's where I went. So that was a great form of connection for me to kind of encourage me to keep talking and keep doing what I was doing. That's how I took it, that exercise. And which I did. I continued on because when I originally did this exercise, it's funny because going back many years back, we have another program which we do after the phase one program that Jasmine talked about, which we call a phase two program. So in at that time it was only 8 weeks, and the idea behind this program, without going too far off track here, is we talk more about being stuck, about being mindful, pause, gratitude. We talk about a story. But anyway, I ended up doing it there, and that's where I made the connection. But I was much further along, and I was able to do that. Thank God to Kelly. I still thank Kelly to this day for doing that with me. So the second part of the exercise, rather another written part of the exercise, which we do, is which I think is equally hard for people, is well, we write a letter to our offender, right? And the thing is, so with writing that exercise, is for a lot of people, and including myself, and I did write my letter to slash my offenders, is that what I was able to do with that, aside would help me feeling, inside, with being able to voice what I felt, versus just keeping it internalized, which I did all my life. How angry I was, and that was just another form of being able to express my anger through his letter. So, to make a long story short, after I wrote that letter, which I found very, very healing, I took it outside and I burned it.
Yeah.
Right, which is sometimes things that we do because we don't always have access. I couldn't mail his letter or anything of the sort. I needed to do something. I needed to get rid of it somehow. So this is another part of the exercise which we don't often talk about, but sometimes, well, what do we do with that letter now that we've written that? It's very powerful, like with the left and the right hand exercise. Again, that's something I didn't burn that because I kept it to remind me of, to this day, if I need to go look back and say, well, Stuart, look how far you've come. That's what I use that for. The other one, writing to my offender, that I had to burn. And hopefully that kind of explains why we do this writing exercise with the inner child. I can talk about this for another hour because we even have a 4 week, 4 or 6 weeks.
Depends on the facilitators.
It depends on the facilitators, but we have, like, we'll do groups where we just talk about inner child, and we'll take out 4 weeks and we'll get a bunch of people to come on board, male or female, and we can dive in deeper into the inner child because there's so much that's not answered. Even with the 3 weeks that we do, we could go on a lot more and talk about that. A lot of people like to want to journal, and maybe people need time to process the exercises we've given them, like, and myself as an example, to be able to figure this out. But there's always a way, and this is what I love about this type of, cognitive behavioral therapy, because that's precisely what it is. The approach that we went to achieve these kind of methods. And don't get me wrong, I don't think it worked for everybody, but for the amount of people that I've seen come and do this, majority of people walk away shaking their heads and going, aha, now that makes a lot of sense. Thank you.
Yes, thank you so much. Wow. I love that idea of especially the dual writing exercise. I've never heard that before. And that's really, really such a interesting way to just connect. I've heard a lot about different inner child work throughout different programs and like even through just being an artist. And like I love connecting with trying to connect with my inner child through like acting exercises and things like that. So that's where like my base has kind of settled is in that area. I like as an artist, I got to explore it that way. And then I started doing more reading and research and I was like, oh wow, this is actually like so much more powerful than I ever realized. And since then I've had a lot of conversations with different people who have had those tough conversations with their inner children, and at the varying ages and being like, wow, my inner teenager, she's hurt, and actually being able to sit down and connect with them is so powerful and so beautiful. And I love that you were able to have that experience, even if it wasn't right away, it still happened. And I think that's something that I hope the listeners like really hold on to because we all take a different amount of time, right? You can do that exercise. It might be the third time, before it really settles and sinks in, or it might be right away. We can't really say for sure when it's going to click and like really connect, especially because we have all these fears and walls up, and you might not be ready yet for various reasons, and that's why these programs are there to help kind of guide you through those steps. So that's very beautiful. So thank you so much for sharing that. And I'm very glad that that is something that takes priority in the healing process with your programs, because especially with, of course, dealing with people who are child sexual abuse survivors, they that needs to be paid attention to. You can't just heal where you're at right now in your adult life. You have to go back, and doing that in a safe way, in a supported way, is just so necessary. So that's I really really love that. That is a big part of the program. So thank you so much for sharing that. And I love that we have whole programs just dedicated to that. That's incredible.
And you just highlighted something too that happens a lot in society. The society doesn't see the wounded inner child; they see the adult, and people hear things like, why are you talking about this now? Why aren't you over this?" And it's like, well, there's a hidden bag of shame that the survivor is carrying that needs to be unpacked in a safe and inclusive space, or spaces like the Gatehouse. And there's still a lot of shame and stigma associated with being a survivor, right? People out there, I think general society doesn't fully understand the extent of the hurt that is caused by the act of violating a child. And they need to educate themselves on how to actually talk to survivors, be with survivors. And sometimes the best thing you can do is say nothing and be there for that person while they're expressing themselves, while they're sharing their story, maybe for the first time. I can't tell you how many people walk through our doors and have said, the first time I shared, I was shut down and I didn't say anything for another 10 years. Right. And it's sad to hear those kinds of stories, and it's a very common experience that they've been shamed again or shut down again by the people they're supposed to be able to trust.
Yeah, you feel safe with somebody, you want to be able to be vulnerable with them and share this very hurtful personal experience that happened to you. And if you're not met with support and respect and someone who just is there for you, that is so heartbreaking. So how do you move forward without actually being shown what it's like to feel support? You're grasping for it at that point and really being hopeful. And if someone doesn't actually give you that, and again, like you said, it might just be sitting and listening to them. Like, you don't have to necessarily do these huge steps, because that's what these programs are for. A lot of times that's the work that takes the time. That's definitely a big one. Just having the societal understanding of it. I 100% agree that it's unfortunate how much that is not something that people understand. And talking about mental health in general, like, the understanding around certain disorders has become a lot better, but still there's still such stigma and shame and all of these things around so much, like abuse survivors, people who struggle with addiction. Like, there's just so many spots and big areas that are still just kind of brushed over at this point. Like, people just aren't looking because they don't want to, probably because it's scary to look at, and it is. But we're not going to get anywhere if we keep just not looking. If you just close your eyes and turn the other way, like, if there no difference will be made at that point. So it is the uncomfortable conversations, that make you want to hide and curl up in a ball. Those are the ones that we have to have, because it happens to so many people, and so many people never talk about it. Or again, they wait 10, 15 years before they talk about it.
Or longer.
Exactly. Or longer. You never know. And again, unless you're in that situation, that's, if you are one of the survivors, that's the only how it feels, of course. But there should be so much more just a general understanding and empathy, and just so much less shame would do us so much good. I got very intrigued by program like breakdowns pages. And the other section that I would love to chat a little bit about, and again, share as much as you would like here, about the dreams section and nightmares section. Because again, I know that's something that's so common with PTSD. I myself have nightmares all of the time. And I've had, it's taken me my whole life to figure out what those like triggers are and what can like activate those stressful sleeps that then carry into these nightmares. And even now, it's still something that can shift and change. It's almost like, okay, I figured out this area, but then for some reason it like worms its way around and like, okay, but here's this other spot that is going to still activate the stress in you before you go to bed so that these nightmares still happen. um, so yeah, I would love to talk about, I guess, if there's any other like different programs or information that you can share for people who I guess just struggle with kind of nightmares.
For sure. I can highlight, I think the combination approach may be helpful for people. And again, depends, right? There are medications out there that do help to suppress the brain's ability to go into that state of having recurrent nightmares. A combination of that with therapy, peer support, and sometimes even our own facilitators. Myself, I'll speak from my own experience. When I'm facilitating groups here, I tend to have more active dreams that sometimes are confusing. So I guess it can be along the lines of a nightmare. It is a risk of being, engaged with these programs, especially if we have lived experience. And even if we don't have lived experience, like listening to other people's stories, grounding, self care is a huge practice that we instill in our volunteers and staff members as well to make sure that everybody is doing that, right? Journaling may be helpful to deal with some of the messages that are in nightmares. I often find myself Googling things like I have recurrent loss of teeth nightmare. So that one, and I have one too where I'm lost somewhere and I can't find my way out. So, like, these are things, it's a good indicator. So, it's also to how we look at what those nightmares are. They can be very distressing, very scary, of course, right? We don't want to underscore them. There are techniques like lucid dreaming, but again, you'd have to find a qualified practitioner to help you do that, where you actually learn to take control of the dream that you're in, right? And again, it's not for everyone. Journaling is helpful. Doing some meditation before bed if you can, engage with meditation. I tend to write right after something has come up in a dream that is distressing. I will note it down because then I'll forget, but my body will feel it, right? So just knowing that there's a mind body disconnect for survivors often. Getting ourselves back to that state of homeostasis is really important when waking up from a nightmare. Saying things like, you are here, you are now, you are safe, holding a grounding object, whether that's a teddy bear or your pillow. Sometimes screaming into the pillow might be helpful for people. It just depends what you need to do for yourself. Sometimes just going into the shower and taking a shower and trying to go back to sleep if you can. Sometimes it's really difficult to go back to sleep. So you might find yourself going to the gym at 3 a.m. because that's what you need to do to resolve your nightmare feelings in your body, right? It's about getting back to feeling calm. So there's a myriad of strategies, but and I find that sometimes people are afraid to engage with medication for fear of stigma, for fear of being judged, for taking meds. But meds are here; they're out there to help people. But it's a combination. Like there's no shame in having to take medication to regulate something that is abnormal, right? Like we're trying to regulate something that's not normal.
Yeah, definitely. I remember when I was younger, I just like have always had very active dreams, and then as I got older, I always had a lot of nightmares. I just thought everyone had nightmares. I just thought that. And I even, have go so far as like the paralysis type nightmares and you can't move. So I've dealt a lot with that. And I had no idea that that wasn't just like a normal occurrence for people until I started talking about it in my adult years. And they're like, what are you talking about? And I was like, oh, like it was such a shock to me that this wasn't just a thing everybody experienced, that sleep, kind of was scary a lot of the times. And then I started having conversations and I realized, oh, it's not supposed to be like
What did
this.
you do? yourself like regulate, as much as possible in that situation.
A lot of times now, like I have to get up and move around. Otherwise, I can't get back to sleep. Like it's something simple as just like trying to walk. Maybe sometimes I'll turn on all the lights just to like remind myself, like, again, this is where I am. I'm here right now. I'm not where I was in that dream. I'll go back to bed. Uh, my ex partner had to like physically wake me up sometimes before. So that was also another whole thing, trying to like learn to live with it while living with somebody else. I was like, oh, again, you don't experience this to the same extent that I do. Okay, cool. This is a conversation, and like dealing with that. It's like, oh, I've never really thought about that before. Okay. And again, these things just aren't talked about. So it's not, people just don't really necessarily know how to respond to it. And there is so many helpful things to do, like journaling, definitely, like you mentioned, that can be really, really great. Having those kinds of conversations, that's somewhere I still feel like, I don't know if shame is the right word, but I think just fear of being judged to bring up those kinds of conversations with friends, whoever, once I like really realized how a lot of people just don't experience that, always so difficult to bring up. It's slowly getting easier, especially because I talk about it publicly like this now.
But thank you for sharing that. Like, it's something you're not alone in that. I can guarantee that almost every survivor that walks in this door has had to face at one point in their life or over a period of time recurrent dreams that are nightmares. Um, the trapped one is common. The confused one is common. It's looking for, like, for me, it's looking for the theme. Like, what is this dream really about? Right? Our minds, when we fall asleep, our subconscious gets to play.
Yes.
So it's also to how we reframe these things. So our unresolved issues in awake life tend to try and resolve themselves in our subconscious mind. Going to sleep is the biggest loss of control. And it might scare people at this point. The biggest loss of control that we have, aside from dying, right? We don't have control about what the heck's going on. For a survivor of child sexual abuse or any form of abuse, really, the loss of control is very activating, right? So some people actually struggle with the opposite. They cannot sleep. They have insomnia, right? So it's running on the same spectrum, but at the opposite side. But knowing that it's your brain, like even how you frame things, it's your brain trying to keep you safe, and you feel so safe that you actually fall asleep, and your brain's like, well, remember that time when you didn't? And you're like, no, I don't want to. But you can't, right? Because you're trapped in an elevator or you're going down a corridor or I'm at an airport and I don't know. I've lost my kids. I can't find my children. And that is so active. I'm like, oh my God, what is that about? And I figured out for me, like I do have two children who are becoming adults now. They're young adults. And I know as a parent, it's the fear of losing my kids, because they're no longer my little kids. They're adults, right? So my brain's trying to resolve that feeling of loss through a nightmare of me losing my kids actually in an airport. It's unfamiliar to me. It's like, come on, come on. But that's what our brains do. And they're so powerful in being able to do that for us. We want to see that, like, to transform that trauma is to see what the process is. This is normal that my brain is trying to do this. It's actually trying to keep me safe by doing this, which sounds weird, but it's actually what's happening. So you feel so safe that you fall asleep that your brain's like, okay, remember that thing that you want to process? Here's some weird dreams, and you're going to wake up all sweaty, or you might be paralyzed for a few seconds, and then you're waking up going, what? Some people who have experienced sleep paralysis also see things, like see actual like apparitions and stuff. I don't know. I'm wondering if you ever had that.
Oh, yes. Yeah, it's terrifying. Yeah, the first time it ever happened, it was when I first lived alone by myself. And then that's when that started happening. And I was like, oh, cool.
You're like, okay, who else is living in my apartment?
Yeah.
Nobody. Your brain going, remember that thing that you need to process? I'm
Yeah.
here.
Yeah.
What our bodies and minds are trying to do. Help us.
Could I add something in here to this as well? In my experience, to what you're talking about, and I struggled with this pretty much from a very, very young age about my nightmares and flashbacks. So, how I dealt with it, or rather, how I perceived I've dealt with this is that one of the big things I've done, and in the beginning of our conversation, we talked about voice. Well, one of the things I did was, well, is I talked about my story. So in the flashbacks and the nightmares that I had carried for pretty much most of my lifetime, have pretty much subsided now, and it's only because of me writing my story and me talking about my story. And I've done this now repetitively more times than I can count. And within saying that, I one of our videos that we show to our participants, where we talk about PTSD or CPTSD, but more specifically PTSD. Obviously, there is a difference between the two of which I'm just talking about, but I'm just talking about PTSD now because that's what we're talking about. And we talk about nightmares and flashbacks. Well, one of the studies I saw from McGill, which they did many years ago, uh, in his study was where they had people write their story and then they had them verbally talk about it. And I'm not just talking about veterans. I'm talking about people that have had car accidents, have had sexual trauma, but anyway, different forms of trauma is my point. Well, it's funny. I kind of took this upon myself without even realizing I was doing this by writing my story and then talking about my story. And the more times I did it, well, before I realized that I'm not having those dreams anymore. So I attribute my dreams, or rather my lack of dreams now, and my lack of flashbacks, only because I talk about my story versus having to keep it internalized. So my experience is that by talking about my story, I've taken away that ability to have those. And don't get me wrong, I could still come back someday and I could still have it if I get triggered, just like what Marie was saying. That could still very, very well happen to me. But I have the differences now that I have better coping strategies, so that if I do get that dream or that horrible nightmare that I used to get all the time, then obviously know I'm going to deal with it in an adult way, if I can put it in context, and not react as I used to react, which would have been drugging, drinking, isolation. See, all these things people don't even consider why people do this from these nightmares, and this is part of it. So I wanted to throw that in there, knowing that if anybody listening to this, that there is a way to do this. And my experience does not mean that your experience will be the same, but my experience telling you that look for different ways to help yourself with your nightmares and flashbacks, because it can get better. But speaking from my own personal experience, but you need to do the research and see what's right for you. Because I want to throw that in.
Yeah, the escapism route tends to be a very just a quick fix, kind of, to get away from it, whether it be alcohol, drugs, or hiding. There's so many different levels to it, to just avoid that, avoid what you're going through, what you're trying to work out, what you're trying to heal. I absolutely love that the more you've spoken about it and written about it, the more it has helped you. And that to me just makes so much sense. Again, it's like getting your voice and giving yourself the power instead of the trauma, the power, or the abuser, the power. You're taking the power back every single time you do that. And eventually it just all adds up and it just becomes your strength and your process of healing. And then, yeah, then these things have less power over you because you've been putting in that work. And yes, there's so many different ways to do it, and finding the right ways that work for you, of course, is incredibly important. But yeah, thank you for sharing that. That's very, very important, I think, for people to just hear, to say, like, you can do this. You can take back that power, that felt like it has been lost for so long. You can. It might take a while, it might take a long time, but that's okay. It'll be worth it once you actually have like nightmare free nights, and like, you're the amount that you are getting triggered and having flashbacks lessens and lessens. That feeling is attainable and such a wonderful thing. Is there anything else that we would like to share about the Gatehouse specifically before we start to wrap it up?
That we're amazing.
I love that. Yes, clearly.
For 25 years, be precise.
We've been amazing for 25 years.
I think I think one of the things that makes the Gatehouse so special is the amount of strength and vulnerability in our participants to pick up the phone and call us, to click that button to enter the Zoom room, to walk that first step up these stairs into this house, right? So it's kind of important for us to constantly validate that, to acknowledge that the amount of courage it takes to just show up, even if they don't share anything in the group, which is totally fine, right? Because that's where they are in their journey. So I just wanted to highlight just that aspect of healing, how it's not easy, how, like Maria mentioned, there's minimizing, there's dismissing, there's not being believed in childhood and so forth. So for survivors to um, the courage, the strength it takes to be that vulnerable in this space and show up to foster community, to foster connection within themselves, within the other participants, it really, really is a special thing. So I just wanted to acknowledge and highlight that as part of the Gatehouse experience.
Yes, thank you so much. Absolutely. That first step is gigantic. It's probably one of the biggest steps anyone can take. So it's so important to celebrate that and share that in such a safe, supportive environment is, yeah, that's absolutely wonderful. Thank you all for tuning in and listening. This again was a conversation with Maria, Stuart, and Jasmine from the Gatehouse in Toronto. My name is Michelle Crossman, and until next time, this is Moving Beyond Stigma.